I don't know any other way to express my guilt other than through this entry. I'm an engineer for a private power company in Arizona. We have substations spread out in somewhat remote locations throughout the desert, and essentially I'm assigned to keep an eye on and maintain these properties. My shift typically runs through the night into the morning, and I'm not the kind of person that requires a lot of sleep, so I have a decent amount of free time on my hands during the day before my shift begins. So I tinker with things. I've always been into radios. I was in a ham radio club in school. Didn't make me very popular, but I enjoyed it. It was a hobby that followed me into adulthood. There's just something amazing about tuning in and talking to people thousands of miles away. I talk to everyone. People in different time zones, different cultures, young, old people. I didn't care. Ham radio didn't discriminate. It didn't care what nationality you were, or where you were from, or how rich or poor you were. The only thing that mattered was the thrill of communication. And that's what I felt. But I always thought there could be more, you know? We can communicate with almost every inhabited corner of the earth. Who's to say we couldn't communicate beyond the stars? If there was life out there capable of receiving our transmissions, well, I don't have to explain to you how revolutionary that would be for mankind. I spent time studying narrowband signals, like the WOW signal, and other potential methods of contacting life on other planets. At the time of doing the research, no actual messages, encoded or otherwise, had been received from extraterrestrial beings. Just sharp blasts of unmodulated radio energy with unknown origin. That was the closest we've come. I studied the Big Ear, the radio observatory that used to be at the Ohio State University. One of the only radio stations ever to pick up what might have been transmission from an alien source. I studied the conditions surrounding this transmission, from the frequencies to the weather to the ambient temperature. I looked at the moon phases surrounding the event, researched planetary movement, anything I could do to replicate the situation surrounding the receiving of that signal. I looked into the research of Cornell physicists who speculated that a frequency of 1420 megahertz would have been the frequency at which extraterrestrial beings would try to contact us. It consumed all my free time. I became obsessed with the idea of contacting life outside our planet. After a long time and a lot of research, I was able to develop a prototype of what I called Big Ear 2, or Bigger Ear. I know, not the most original or even cool-sounding name, but creativity had pretty much flown out the window at this point. I was using tech that wasn't available back when Ohio State had their observatory. My mini radio observatory was capable of scanning all frequencies which had the potential to receive a transmission from space. It would then record it and also document the conditions surrounding the transmission so it could potentially be responded to. It took longer than I thought to even pick anything up. And even then, it was just weeks and weeks of dead ends, picking up natural signals of earthly origin or signals made by other people. After a couple of months, I began to think that this all might have been in vain. Then one day it happened. A transmission was recorded while I was at work. A transmission that I was 95% sure had an unearthly origin. And the thing that really excited me was what I noticed when I looked at the record of the transmission. It contained something no one has ever seen from an extraterrestrial transmission before. A pattern. This meant that it was almost definitely some kind of message. A message I tried time after time to decode, but to no avail. My next option was to transmit signal after signal using the same frequencies, and then attempt to communicate back with wherever the original message came from, and maybe we would get a response. They didn't respond. They didn't send anything back. They came. I still remember what it looked like. I was working my night shift out there at a sub in the desert, and I saw those lights descending from the sky. I knew immediately what it was. In my estimation, they were waiting. Back then, back in 1977, when the Big Ear received the supposed message from space, scientists could only marvel and guess as to what it meant. They didn't have the knowledge, experience, or technology to do more than that. They knew we weren't ready then. But when I sent my signal from my observatory, it was all they needed. All they needed to know that we were ready. Ready for takeover. If anyone out there somehow finds this, I'm sorry.